Welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through what is honestly a fascinating little corner of government procurement. Now, if you know anything at all about federal contracting, you already know that full and open competition is the golden rule, right? It's the standard operating procedure, the bedrock meant to keep everything fair, transparent, and, efficient. But there is a highly guarded VIP exception to this rule. It's this incredibly specialized pathway where the usual competitive gates just shut completely, and only one vendor gets a seat at the table. So today, we are going to unpack exactly what it takes to get past that velvet rope and really understand the strict rules governing what we call sole source acquisition.
Okay, let's dive into this roadmap. We are going to break down these, let's be honest, sometimes notoriously dry FAR regulations into 5 clear rules. We'll cover 1, the sole source exception, 2, breaking the competition rule, 3, no excuses for poor planning, 4, documenting the decision, and finally, 5, small business sole source programs. Starting right off with Section 1, the sole source exception, navigating Subpart 2.1. So, I want you to imagine a scenario. The government has this absolutely critical, time-sensitive requirement, or maybe they need a piece of highly specialized technology, and that standard, drawn-out competitive bidding process, it simply cannot apply. You can imagine that creates a tremendous amount of tension. How does a massive bureaucracy even function when it can't rely on its standard, tried-and-true rulebook? What happens when there is literally only one option? Or, well, at least what happens when the government believes there's only one viable option for fulfilling need? You obviously can't just stop operations. You've got to adapt. And that adaptation is exactly the fundamental problem that sole source acquisitions are designed to solve. Here is the exact definition straight from Subpart 2 of the FAR. A sole source acquisition is a contract for the purchase of supplies or services that is entered into after soliciting and negotiating with only one source. I really want to emphasize that last part for a second. Only one source. In a massive system built entirely around comparing multiple offers to find the best value for taxpayers, negotiating with a single entity, that is the ultimate exception to the rule. Moving right along to Section 2, breaking the competition rule, Section 6103 explained. So the crucial point is that because it's such a massive departure from the norm, breaking that golden rule of full and open competition isn't something a contracting officer can just do on a whim. No way. It requires strict adherence to the specific authorities laid out in Section 6.103 of the FAR. Bypassing full and open competition is an exception, not a right. The government inherently wants and frankly desperately needs competition. Competition is that invisible hand, right? It drives innovation way up, it drives costs way down, and ultimately it protects taxpayer dollars. So when you take competition off the table, the government takes on a lot more risk, and that is exactly why the authority to bypass it is so tightly controlled.
And even when an agency actually invokes an exception under 6.103, it's not like they can just blindly hand over a contract. Look at this incredibly strict 3-step process they still have to follow. Step 1. The contracting officer must still solicit offers from as many potential sources as is practicable under the circumstances. Step 2. They have to consider all bids, proposals, or capability statements they receive. You can't just ignore a company that actively raises its hand. And Step 3. They must secure the required justification and approval, the J&A. Think of this whole process as a kind of tough love authority. The rules are specifically designed to force the government to look for competition even when they're absolutely convinced there isn't any.
Which brings us to Section 3. No excuses for poor planning. These are the strict bouncers of contracting.
And this brilliantly illustrates what I mean by bouncers. You want to get into the exclusive sole source club? Well, they are checking your ID, and more importantly, they are checking your excuses right out the door. An explicitly authorized exception under Section 6.103, that is a perfectly valid VIP pass. But a lack of planning by the requiring activity, or, say, concerns related to the amount of expiring funds, those are absolutely invalid. Listen, running out of time or running low on money, those are your problems. They are not an excuse to circumvent the competitive process.
In fact, the FAR is incredibly direct about this. It states, point blank, contracting without providing for full and open competition must not be justified on the basis of a lack of planning. End of story. It is a strict zero-tolerance policy. The stakes are simply too high, and the government completely refuses to let administrative laziness or just poor project management be the catalyst for handing out a sole source monopoly.
All right, let's jump into Section 4, documenting the decision, focusing on the paperwork and the SAT.
Let's move to and see how this builds. Because, as you might completely expect whenever we're dealing with the federal government, every single exclusive VIP pass comes with a massive stack of paperwork attached to it. Under FAR Subpart 12.102, contracting officers must thoroughly document any decision to restrict competition. And get this even applies if they are just demanding a specific brand name description without allowing for equal replacement products. If you demand a specific brand, you are inherently restricting competition. There are also special, highly specific rules that kick in when these acquisitions fall at or below what's known as the Simplified Acquisition Threshold, or SAT.
So, for acquisitions valued at or below that simplified acquisition threshold, the contracting officer has a very clear, strict mandate. They absolutely must extensively document the decision, proving that only one source is available, and they have to detail the precise basis for that decision. It is nowhere near enough to just shrug and say, hey, we only found one guy. Nope. The contracting officer has to show their math, definitively proving and putting on paper the total lack of alternatives. And finally, we arrive at Section 5, Small Business Sole Source Programs, the VIP exceptions under Subpart 19.1.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that up until now, we've basically just talked about how incredibly hard it is to get a sole source contract and how fiercely strict the government is about giving them out. But there is a really empowering side to this whole coin. The government actually creates designated fast pass lanes for certain types of businesses. Under Subpart 19.1, contracting officers are fully authorized to set aside or even directly sole source contracts to specific socioeconomic programs. We've got the Hub Zone program for historically underutilized business zones, the SDVOSB program for service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses, the WOSB program for women-owned small businesses, and, of course, the highly sought-after 8A business development program. Let me be clear, these aren't loopholes. These are deliberate, legally sanctioned VIP pathways purposefully designed to level the playing field and inject vital federal dollars directly into specific business communities.
Which brings us to our final thought for today's explainer. You've seen exactly how tightly guarded the sole source exception really is. You've met the bouncers that reject poor planning, you've seen the mountain of paperwork required to prove a lack of competition, and you've discovered the specific socioeconomic programs that actually encourage it. So I'm going to leave you with this question. Is your business positioned, certified, and truly ready to be that singular, indispensable option? Understanding these FAR rules, you guys, it isn't just about simple compliance. It's about understanding the very DNA of federal contracting strategy. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.